to An Imperfect Union. Tonight, we have a very special guest. Mr. Christopher Griffith is going to be on the show, and he will explain his biracial nationalist foundation. And we'll also have the San Diego Black Panther Party on the line as well. And let's get this show on the road here. Let's get things started. Good afternoon, Mr. Griffith. How are you?
Fine. Thanks for having me on.
You're very welcome. I was reading. I found you actually in the podcast guest community,
Right.
and it's very. I've had a couple pastors on and a few others
Right.
from the community, and I was very intrigued about your foundation, and
Gotcha.
it's. Well, let's we'll get into that a little bit later. But tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Well, I am a graduate from the London Metropolitan University, and I did a postgraduate at Westminster University. I am originally from the UK. I hail from a quite distinguished military background. My father served. It was a combat veteran, and so was my granddad. One of them passed away on the battlefield, and my father, fortunately, survived experience. So it's very much it from my background. I've traveled around the world extensively. I've lived in Africa, lived in Europe, lived in America. So I have quite a broad knowledge of, world politics, that sort of thing. So and my professional experience is I've worked in broadcast media. I worked for the BBC as a trainer, which is sort of an educator for people who are seeking to enter the media profession. So that's what I've done professionally, apart from writing and apart from other pursuits.
And what made you? Well, how did you see a need for such a radical, I guess, a radical experience?
You mean with regard to the book?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I saw the need because primarily and principally, a few years ago, I could see a situation coming about where there would be a bottleneck, which would lead to some sort of civil explosion. As we've witnessed quite recently, I predicted that would happen. I felt the reason why this was happening was because we still live in a world where people are categorized and to some extent defined in non-scientific terms, non-rational terms. The old classification, as you know, the one-drop rule, is still being used, albeit subconsciously in society, which leads to some extent to people who are claim to represent the Black community but don't have the requisite background to do so. I don't need to name names, but I think you know who I'm talking about in particular. These are people from the biracial, demographic. And so I feel they have infiltrated to some extent the Black community and are stirring up a lot of discontent. And some of it is being done obviously for purely financial reasons, other reasons being obviously for fame and notoriety, I feel. So these are some of the things I think has to be addressed. If people are going to put, their opinions out there, they certainly would have to ensure that it doesn't explode or it doesn't cause the sort of rift we've seen quite recently. And so for that reason, I feel that it's time for the mixed race community to have some sort of representation so we can put across our input or our opinions into the because obviously it's easy for a lot of people to say this or that. But I do know that there are a lot of people in this demographic who are Christian, somewhat conservative, and the middle class for the most part. And I feel their opinions are and will have to be taken into account, as the time goes by, in order to avoid, this type of, situation we've been experiencing recently. Now, people may say, well, it is justified considering the fact that, we had this episode occur, but I think to the scale to which the backlash has occurred is the problem. It's not so much that it has occurred, it's the scale of it and the fact that certain outside bodies have infiltrated, obviously, for example, Antifa, and they are continuing with their campaign to destabilize the country. I mean, depending, of course, on if you feel that this is justified. Some people feel, yeah, I'm sure if you're trying to bring about a socialist agenda in America, then that would be justified. However, others may say, I'm not sure, I'm assuming yourself included, that some sort of medium has to be found so that we don't end up, at each other's throats, literally. So that's it, really.
Well, here's my problem is that I think that the middle class has declined. I don't think that the middle class doesn't have the voice that it had in the 80s and 90s and even the beginning of the 2000s because simply the middle class is becoming a dying breed. You're either rich or you're poor. You don't really, and especially since this pandemic, you don't really have that separation
Right.
economically. Well, I
Right.
mean, is there economically is there a middle class?
Well, I'd say there is a lower middle class. That's what people would call poor nowadays, is the lower middle class. Probably 2.5 kids, a car, dog, that sort of thing. The lower
Yeah,
middle class. And you find them everywhere you go in LA. So they're quite a populous group, at
yeah,
least in cities like LA, and I'm sure elsewhere as well. So when
yeah.
you say the middle class, they're not totally eradicated, but the status has gone down somewhat. So when you say middle class nowadays, you're talking mostly lower middle class, which is primarily where I hail from, lower middle class, I'd say. Not upper middle class in the sense that I went to any type of private school or, went on holidays to Switzerland, that sort of thing.
Right, right. But you also lived in Africa. I mean, is there a difference in the economic classes? When you talk about the continent of Africa, I mean, not, and I'm not just talking about, uh, economically, but at one time, was it the the biracial considered a class unto itself in Africa?
Um, I'm not 100% sure about that because you have to realize that if such a thing were to occur, it would occur in America because they, obviously over in Africa, they don't have the communities there are usually people whose parents have came over during colonial times, basically, and who stayed, and then the modern visitors from Europe, and they've had kids with the locals, obviously. So it's very much a case of, you know, they are, you know, I wouldn't say there is a class over there per se. There is in South Africa, that's for sure. I'm aware of that in South Africa. But elsewhere, I'm not so sure. I know there was in here in America back in obviously antebellum times, around the times of the Civil War. I know that until the Civil War, there was these groups here. I like to point out, though, there is a little distinction between what you're talking about and what I'm proposing. What you're talking about is people principally of black and white heritage. And what I'm proposing is people of black and white heritage, along with other types of mixed race people. For example, Chinese white, Chinese black, Indian white, that sort of thing. It's the whole demographic that have been in America since, the founding fathers arrived, basically. So it covers them, the historic demographic, and gives them a voice as well, as the country moves forward. Because as we know, we've had in the past 2 mixed race people in very high offices in this country. And we have a princess who's married to a prince. So, there is there's been quite major breakthroughs in that regard. So I believe there does need to be a political, to some extent reflects this.
But you also bring conservative values.
Yes.
Have conservative values served people of color?
Well, I believe it has. I believe that it has, and people even on the far end of the black nationalist scale, some would agree with me. Like, for example, Malcolm X. I mean, he was very wary of the whole liberal thing. He felt that they were more of an enemy to people of color than the white conservative was, and he stated that in his writings. And I tend to agree with him there, for the most part, that the conservative values tend to be more about raising a family, raising a strong people, on strong principles. It also serves in the sense that it creates a boundary, a conspicuous boundary around that particular group, so that they can't easily be swayed by external values that people try to propose or try to impose upon them. And that is possible, because I see that happening a lot, especially nowadays. If people bringing on their own, what you may call agenda to the table. People bring certain things into the picture. Like, so for example, I mean, what we call Afrocentrism today is not the same as what it was yesterday. I mean, take it, love it or loathe it. It's now incorporates the alternative lifestyle, which I think you know what I'm talking about in terms of people's sexuality, and it incorporates that. So it adds a whole level of complexity to everything. And so if your desire is to create or build strong families, strong communities, that complicates things to a large extent. It throws in a whole, it's hard to say, but to some extent, it can throw things off tangent, off on a tangent, I believe. That's why I feel there's a lot of confusion as of now as to what direction people are heading in. But again, it's a modern choice that people have. I feel that for the biracial nationalist movement, we don't particularly endorse those type of lifestyle decisions, because we are principally looking to raise strong sons to become strong men to build a strong race. That's the plan. And
so what is the nature and purpose of your movement as you lay out the foundation?
well, what the first thing to do would be to form a new demographic that consists of people of black white heritage, along with other types of biracial people. That would be the first thing. Then the next thing would be the ideology. Biracial nationalism is an ideology that applies particularly to mixed race people. In a way that some people say white nationalism applies to white people, black nationalism applies to black people, biracial nationalism applies to mixed race people. It gives you an alternative view of the world and how human beings came about and the real true significance of race. It's more of an anthropological model. It's not based on genetics. It's based on the order that different races emerged on the planet. They are younger and they're older races. And most of what we call racial strife is a form of intergenerational conflict between older races and younger races. And it takes the form of race, because obviously race denotes the age of a people. And racial consciousness is knowing your racial age. This is what biracial nationalism teaches. So people are, individually, everyone's the same, but in groups and communities, these traits become more pronounced. And in my book, I've claimed, as we all know, black people pretty much started everything off with the pyramids all those years ago. That preceded every type of European civilization you can imagine, even preceded the Chinese, and so that's pretty much the situation in terms of how we try to present our ideology to people and what we believe in to people, and so that's it. It's so based upon that, what we teach is that there's a chronology to the way people emerged on the planet. And the next race that will emerge will be the fifth race. And biracial people are the earliest incarnation of this future race. And this will be some thousands of years to come. But this is based upon how other people emerged on the planet and how long it took for other races to emerge on the planet. And there are I know it's a very generalistic model, and it's not exactly the way things, just much more complex than that. But you have to generalize stuff in order to explain it to people and to have a framework in which to present it. So it's so far I've identified black people as the first race, Chinese second race, the Indo race is the third race, Europeans the fourth race, and the fifth race is yet to come. This idea actually comes from an American theosophist called William Corn Judge, if I'm correct. And he proposed the idea of the fifth race in the context I'm talking about, that they would emerge, in his opinion, some 2,500 years from now, I believe. But that's his original prediction, that America is a birthplace for a new race that will emerge in the future. And that's why this country exists. This will be, some thousands of years from now. And if you look at biracial people, they are truly indigenous to American soil, because white people came from Europe and obviously black people came from Africa, but biracial people were conceived on American soil, apart from Native Americans, of course. But that's pretty much, the claim to this, this birthright, So by declaring it now that we're starting this movement, we're claiming this birthright. And we're claiming the future. Everyone claims the past. Everyone says, well, I'm owed this because of what happened in the past. We've rejected the past to a large extent. We're aiming for the future. And even if it's a hypothetical ideal, nevertheless, it will present us with a good role model upon which to base our, movement. So that's pretty much the gist of it.
And what is the Futurist Party?
The Futurist Party is the political and economic wing of the biracial nationalist movement. it's a mainstream party like the Republicans, like the Democrats. Anyone can join. It's not just for mixed race people, it's for anyone pretty much. And it will be a right of center party, and its goal would be to move and develop society along a technological trajectory and to move society towards the space project, basically. What I recommend is that the capitalist system we're witnessing right now could be adapted to one that is revolves around space. And I believe that's the next step. That's the next big hurdle mankind faces. The days of exploration, colonialism, territorial conquest, those days are no longer with us, obviously. As we can see, we put that behind us. So now we have to focus on what the next big step would be. And at least for humanity, at least for America, at least for all of us, we know we're in a technological period in history, obviously. We're in the, at the moment, we're in the midst of the information age, the digital age. And so this has been fully incorporated into the capitalist mode of production, the digital age. Unfortunately, the space age hasn't got to that stage yet. And so I believe we should, and societies and people, politicians, innovators, scientists should start making some headway in that direction so as to at least make some type of progress. Otherwise, we're fighting a rear guard battle against the post-colonial order and the way things used to be. And we are not looking forward enough as to how, we live in a beautiful, very diverse country. Parents go to sleep at night with their families and they dream of something great for their children. This is a great adventure if we could get it going for all Americans and for the rest of the world. The people who set up and built up societies had visions of how the society would be before they began. And so we are here and we can project and see how our societies could emerge, possibly in the future. And so I think we should take steps to achieving this. It's no longer in the realm of science fiction any longer, as we know, because obviously you are aware of, SpaceX and all those guys and what they're doing. And incidentally, I mean, Elon Musk is a white guy from South Africa, which is kind of funny, considering the fact that the movement is the biracial nationalist movement. It's sort of a bit of a coincidence there. So who knows? That could be just, part of it. So, yeah.
So, how do you fit into today's political landscape? When like you said, there's Democrats, there's Republicans. We've never really had an efficient third party. There's been attempts, but it's always been, ever since it was Whigs and Democrats. I mean, we've always had this split. The last was the Southern Democrats, split away from the Northern Democrats, and we've kind of split into the conservatives, the ultra conservatives. How do you propose to effectively insert or have your movement gain that kind of political savvy?
Well, it's not going to be just centered around DC, that's for sure. Most of the grassroots activity would be taking place outside DC. Most of the grassroots activity would be projects being undertaken by some of the foremost innovators, scientists in society. Projects, for example, building projects, community projects, all sorts of projects will be taking place outside the walls of DC, and these projects would be used as some sort of what could I say? They'll be used to convince people and also to draw people's attention to the fact that there are people who can make things happen, not just politicians. Because when you look at DC, everyone relies on politicians to give the okay for things to happen. Now, if this were to take place then, and you had a grassroots movement that was consisted of mostly, or was under the auspices of innovators, like, for example, we talked about Elon Musk. I have a friend of mine who is very prolific in the recycling industry. He owns a company called Big Battery. Now, he's an innovator, and he could be one of these people who would be on the board of such, at least on state level, of one of the factors of the Mutualist Party. It is a way to use technology and innovation to circumvent the gridlock in DC. So when people talk about grassroots movements, like, for example, the Tea Party, and they think of organizing among communities, this would take place in a similar way, but the politics would be replaced by technology. And
so you would be depending upon private funding rather than public funding.
yes, for the most part, yeah. And obviously, that sector is quite well funded. Another thing we'll be looking at is opening up a third stock exchange. You have NASDAQ, you have Wall Street. The third one would be for NASA, for the space program. That'll be later down the line. But for now, the Futurist Party is a party that, to a large extent, seeks to cut ties with the post-colonial past and forge a road towards the future. It has roots in republicanism, that's for sure, because if you read my book, obviously I mentioned some stuff about republicanism. It does have some roots in republicanism in the sense that it's a free market movement. It's, very much one that's based on the sovereignty of the nation state. It's, it's obviously Christian, so in a lot of ways it's about competitive individualism. So it has all these things incorporated into it. So that makes it, some sort of offshoot of republicanism, you could say, or some sort of modern offshoot of republicanism, just in the same way that republicanism was an offshoot of the Whigs. So this would be similar, in that sense.
How would what would be the difference between independence and secession?
Okay, you mean like independence, like for the movement? You mean, or you mean like
independence? You say biracial nationalists. So,
right?
are you saying that you and you speak of the fifth race? So, are you
Right.
talking of the independence? Such as England from Ireland, or
Right.
are you talking about where there's a physical barrier? This is our land. This is your much. Much like this is. If you're talking about NASA, how do you stop the colonization from following you? Do you set up something separate or independent, or
Right.
you know?
Well, for now, it's going to be a movement, and people can join the movement if they are mixed race, and we'll have, like, obviously, members in a chapter in every state. There's not going to be really any type of. It's once the organization picks up steam and more people become aware of it, then there will be an educational program which consists of multiracial identity development. That would be the main strand of it. So it's not so much a separation, so much as an augmentation of racial consciousness and making people aware of their racial identity. So there's no real need for anything dramatic per se, because it's not. There are no. I mean, obviously, we are not a separate economic, you know, group in society. I mean, we're all part of society, so there can't really be any type of real. It's all an informal process. It's not nothing that's that's obviously would require any change in laws or anything of that sort. Obviously nowadays, if you fill out the usual questionnaires or surveys, there's always nowadays a category for other. So that's been covered now. People are aware of it, especially with regard to the census. So it's more of a case of educating people as to their racial identities. I mean, one thing about the whole people of color thing is that I don't feel that mixed race people really belong in that category, because the people in that category tend to be people from what I call the traditional races, like, for example, Indians, Chinese, Black people. They are the traditional races. And so they have a racial identity that was prefixed thousands of years ago, that's been handed down to them from generation to generation. And a Black person would say, well, I'm the son of Shaka Zulu. I'm the son of Mansa Musa. Mexican would say, I'm the son of, Montezuma, right? A Chinese person would say, I'm the son of, a child of the Shang dynasty, that sort of thing. It's been passed on to them from generation to generation. Their racial consciousness is fixed, and this has been determined throughout history. Whereas in the case of mixed race people, it's now a case, and now is the time to start developing such a racial identity. So when you are considered a mixed race person in that group of what you may call, people of color, they are among people who have racial identities that have been passed down to them over the generations, from father to son, for the most part. So that's the reason why I don't feel that the term of mixed race people belong to that particular category of people of color, because, as I said, they are still it's easy to say, well, yeah, it's easy for a mixed race person to identify with, say, the Black community, or if there were other mixes, to say identify with the Chinese community. But that would be sort of a halfway measure, really, especially in this day and age, because the picture is a bit more complex than that. I mean, for example, if I was in Africa and you saw me, you'd know I'm not a native straight off the bat. You'd know, well, I'm a product of some European and African blood. So with that regard, it now calls for some redefinition, and the same deal as well. In fact, you saw him in Europe, you'd know, obviously, I'm not, a descendant of pure European blood, but, a mix of, African and European. So the same thing applies in Europe as well. So obviously there is a need, given that, consideration, to redefine and also to educate people on, on these matters. So yeah, that's pretty much.
Something that I've found, I just turned 74.
Oh, congratulations! You look great.
So, and one of the things that I've found throughout my lifetime is I find that the world is becoming more mixed race. We don't have those barriers that we used to have when I was a kid, or
Oh
perhaps
yeah,
when you were a kid growing up in,
yeah,
in Africa. There is a lot of uh, biracial people in the world, and I think that this is the way. I mean, I don't, the days of Hitler, the pure Aryan race, and all that. I think those days are over. Like you say, I mean, it might take 2,000 years. It might take 1,000 years, but
right,
I, but I can see, there'll be a day when everyone will be some hue of brown or yellow, or as you say. So, how do you erase past history by creating your own, or do you embrace past history as history, and not as um, a deity?
right.
If you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, we start from the Christian premise that all of us belong to the same family. So we all are of the same family. So history has to exist. I mean, we all are, every human being and every race of human being illustrates some sort of continuity in the human timeline. That continuity cannot be broken. We have to go. All have to be here, and human history has to be. It cannot be replaced by anyone who comes along. That's like Hitler idea. So, a new race turns up and everyone's gone. That's like a Hitler idea. That's so wrong, because for any family you have, older members of the family, right? You have your granddads, then you have the fathers. That's human. Is this humanity as well? And we should not forget about that. That's very important. If this new race were to emerge, because one thing that lends credence to this idea is simply the fact that we do have four distinct races of people. You could say, well, there are black people, there are white people, there are Chinese people, there are Indian people. They're very distinguishable, if you know what I mean. And they also immediately can be associated with certain land masses, like, for example, Europe is for white people, Africa, black people. And I believe that God created a continent for each race. I believe that. People may not believe that. I believe that. So, with regard to that, it's very important to keep our history intact. And what's happening is, as new human beings emerge, or new generations of human beings emerge, they'll simply be the younger ones. They'll come with their own civilization, you know, and they'll be the younger ones. Everyone will be trying to adapt to their way of doing things, right? The way that everyone else today is trying to adapt to the way that Europeans do their thing, Most of it is that, and what lends credence to the fact that Europeans are a newer civilization is what you often hear indigenous people saying. It was very common. It's, well, my people were here for thousands of years before the white man came along. Of course,
Right.
because white man just, his civilization just is recent. So, he hasn't been anywhere. He's been around, but he's been coming up, put it that way. So the same thing occurs right now. The other people coming up right now. So when they finally come to, the around, people say, oh yeah, my people were here thousands of years before certain came along. And another thing as well to take into consideration is that what another factor that comes into play, especially when you're talking about how people develop, is environmental conditions, the environment. I have a theory that the newer race of people that emerge will have the ability to reproduce skin tissue using a process similar to photosynthesis, which is what plants use and leaves use to reproduce chlorophyll using sunlight. And human beings will find at some point a way to use the skin in the way that leaves use sunlight, water, and chlorophyll to produce tissue. That could be the next level up. So skin color now can be, it denotes a different type of skin, a skin that is capable of cellular regeneration. using sunlight, for example, and probably other things like food ingested as well. That's a new level, whole new level, and that is possible because and again, what we imagine and what we can see, what we think it will be, it's hard to say. And it is true that there is a lot of mixing going on in the world at the moment. But the thing is that invariably, what happens is that people still go into the old categories. Like you have a lot. What you have find at the end of the day, what you may find in say 1,000 years from now is that you look around, and you still see white people, black people, Chinese people, and Indian people, right? But there's more mixes in their blood than before. Do you know what I mean? So
Right.
it's not everyone's going to look like me. There'll still be a lot of people who look like white, black, Chinese, Indian, but chances are they'll be a bit more mixed than they are now. So that's one thing to take into consideration, because obviously, you'd have to be consistently having people mixing between races to have the middle ground. Like if people, for example, half Chinese, half white person, whereas a white person, obviously the children wouldn't be white, though they'd be quarter Chinese, So the casual observer, they'll just be looking at a white person and they'll assume that they came from Europe, but they are a quarter Chinese. So that's what will happen in the future for the most part. You look around, you still see people who look like traditional, races of people, but there's probably a bit more mixed than they were. And like I said, it's the whole thing about being pure. Obviously, is a bit of a misnomer. It's never really happened. I mean,
Right.
they
Uh,
did a DNA test of Hitler himself, and he has Jewish blood and sub-Saharan African blood in him. That's the
uh,
truth. There's a DNA
yeah.
test.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. It's, but
Yeah.
when you talk about things like this, and I mean, quite naturally out here in California, and some of the prominent things that you hear out here, uh, such as stem cells and things like that. Uh,
Right.
there have been places, I'm sure, where they do grow skin cells, not exactly the way that you're talking about, but
Right.
when you're talking about NASA and things like this, and you're talking about plants and and,
Right.
and tissue, are you speaking specifically of genetically engineering?
No. I don't support, obviously germline engineering, when it comes to human beings, especially because that's a whole very dangerous ground to be covering. I recall quite recently there was an experiment in China where they tried to do some germline engineering. I'm not sure what species it was, and it was pretty horrific to look at. It looked like five things that had been merged together, five separate, I'm not sure if they were dogs or I don't think they were dogs.
I think they were bats and something. I'm not
Something like
exactly
that,
sure.
yeah. You see, germline engineering or genetic engineering is and can be used as a weapon of mass destruction very easily. It's very dangerous. It should be highly regulated and monitored. However, having said that, I do state in my book that I regard race mixing as a crude form of genetic engineering, in a sense that if you had a white person breed with a white person, you just have a white person. Same thing with the black person breeding with a black person, you'd have a black person. Whereas if you had a white person breeding with a black person, you'd have something that's not quite one or the other. It's sort of engineered, like the genes were engineered to produce a different effect. So there have been cases where there has been a famous case. I saw this on TV. It's an Irish family, a white couple, had a son who looked like me. And there's no explanation of how that happened. They went back in their DNA all the way back, and they had no black antecedents in the family line, and the guy himself had white genes. He wasn't, it wasn't half black, half white genes. He had white genes, but he looked like me. And he looked at, he tried to find out how this could have happened. Eventually, he became very conscious. He embraced Rastafarianism, and he became conscious. You know, he tried to, you know, he was aimed to be more conscious of that part of his heritage, even though it wasn't there. And I'm sure if you looked online, you find out about it. It's quite a very highly unusual case, you know, and it raises questions, you know. So if, say, for example, a white couple were to have someone who looked like me, they would have to have some sort of, you know, it'd have to be germline engineering. If you did it in a lab, they'd have to mess around with the, you know, the genetic code, the genomes, basically, to produce someone like me. However, it can be done if you have two different races of people mixing. So it is considered a crude form of genetic engineering. And if it's considered over a period of time with a specific environment, for example, an environment that was, say, you know, had low level of light or a different type of light, you could have potentially a different race of people emerging over a long period of time, which is the way that, you know, most of the races emerged. Because, you know, if you follow this idea to its logical conclusion, it begins 50,000 years ago. The whole biracial nationalism thing begins 50,000 years ago, when human beings first emerged from Africa and spread around the world. It's known as the Out of Africa hypothesis that was put forward by Charles Darwin. And so I believe that at some point, the human beings, some of them stayed in Africa, and the ones who stayed in Africa were located around the equator, and they in turn colonized most of Africa, which is now black people, as we know. And they went through the process as well, before they got to this stage, because dark skin obviously is a process, is from the sun around the equator. It's protection against the sun, just in the same way that white skin is a product of the Ice Age, about 10,000 years ago in Europe. And also breeding between different types and different tribes, approximately 15 to, say, 10,000 years ago. So, you know, like I said, I believe that the whole thing it can be, I mean, I believe that it's a process in itself, and it starts off with, because what it would take for a human being to evolve, say, from one distinct look, like, say, my look, to looking like, say, a European, or, say, an Indian, or, say, a Chinese person, if I didn't breed outside my race, it would be millions of years. It's literally millions of years. But it needs significant genetic variation to show up if you're breeding along strictly racial lines.
So, are you saying that you would only breed with a mixed race person?
Oh no, I'm saying no, I'm not saying that. No, not at all. I don't recommend. I mean, that's not something I recommend. I don't believe that people should say you should breed this, but no, I'm not saying. I'm saying that what would happen?
Because there's a possibility that, you know, since you are biracial, you could have a son that's lighter or darker than you.
Yeah, that's true. But what I mean to say, though, is that if you had, say, okay, if you had, say, people, say, a white person, or if I had, if I understand what you're saying, but say if you had, so this is a good example. If you had an Indian person and you had someone who had blonde-haired, blue-eyed baby, you'd be like, whoa, that's. But then if you saw his wife, and his wife had blonde-haired, blue eyes, you think, oh, okay, he's married to a woman who's blonde-haired, blue-eyed, right? So the kid is blonde-haired, blue-eyed. But if you have two Indian people who produce someone who's blonde-haired, blue-eyed, you'd be like, well, wait a minute, that's unusual, right? I mean, you'd be like, how can two Indian people produce that? So if that were to happen throughout history, and just Indian people reproducing, what it would take to produce those traits would be a million years, millions of years of evolution to do that. But it can be done quicker. It can be done if an Indian man marries a woman who has blonde-haired, blue eyes. If you know what I mean. But if
Right.
in the absence of another race, for a race of people to produce someone who's that distinctly different, it would have to be over thousands and thousands of years, millions of years, sorry, millions of years. But it can be done. But if it happens quicker if, say, for example, someone just marries someone who looks and has those features, it happens immediately. So this period of evolution, the period that it would take to produce someone, like I said, millions of years. Like, for example, it takes millions of years for us to walk upright, that sort of thing, or
Okay.
to have any significant changes in the way we look as human beings. But they can be sped up by simply intermarrying someone who has different looks. So it is a form, in my opinion, of genetic engineering in the sense that it can produce something that's not exactly one thing or the other, and ultimately can lead to something that's wholly unique, which I think that's what nature strives to do, is to produce novelty. No, nature doesn't just produce the same thing over and over again. It seeks to produce something that's completely novel, completely different from anything that's ever been. So that's the gist of my argument, at least.
So, how do you feel in the long run that society will benefit from having a
Movements.
biracial?
Well, what I stress is that there needs to be people need to biracial people need to be aware of their racial identity as a prelude to being constructive and benevolent contributors to society. That would be the overall aim. To produce and to contribute something to society that makes society more stable. I believe that we're past the age of war. Those days are well over. I think humanity has not got the stomach for war anymore. Not at least not the whole scale wars we've seen in the past. We have to find other ways of resolving our issues, and one of these ways would be to encourage the development of a new demographic that can, to some extent, mediate between, the existing races, so to speak, and acts as a bridge between them. I believe that this was the case until quite recently when, fortunately, Barack Obama took office. And then since then, and it seems as though we've been inundated with a host of biracial people who are super militant, and I'd say unnecessarily so, because they seem to be stoking the fires of racial unrest, in my opinion, at least. The language is not conciliatory, not in the slightest sense. It's more inflammatory. And if we even go back to the 70s, you see people like Bob Marley. I mean, he was very conscious as a black person, as a mixed race person, but nevertheless, his message was about one love, bringing unity between people, between races. And I'm not seeing that nowadays. I've seen people who are hell bent on causing conflict, hell bent on stoking up old wounds, stoking up old, what have you. So that would be something that we'd obviously have to examine and look into and see how this demographic can act as a bridge between other groups and other races in society. I believe that ultimately everyone in society, every race in society, it's in their interest to promote the progress of their interest to promote progress within society, because we can all benefit from a more technological society where everyone is more informed, more educated, where everyone has some semblance of spiritual groundedness, where people are more conscientious of themselves as citizens, as human beings in relation to one another, and where people also are aware of the fact that we are all one family. And so we must
Now,
regard as such and
now,
not
now,
look.
what you just said are the teachings of Malcolm also. The teachings of Malcolm after he went to Mecca and after he
Right,
had separated himself from the Nation of Islam. Uh,
right,
he,
yeah,
so Malcolm wasn't all about fire and brimstone. He did come to the point where there should be some type of unity among, because when he went to Mecca and he saw all colors, all hues of
right,
people,
right,
it made him realize that there was a need for unity, that
right,
there wasn't uh, this type of war, like he said,
right,
that this would be something that would not benefit society in the long run.
right.
Now, what would you say are some of the spiritual precepts of your movement?
Right. Well, as you know, the de facto belief system of the movement is Christianity. Um, it's a type of Christianity called supersessionism, or replacement theology. And what this is a type of Christianity that is based solely upon the New Testament, not upon the Old Testament. It's
Okay.
the new covenant. The new covenant. Now, the type of Christianity that is practiced today is not a true form of Christianity in the sense that it's what one might call dual covenant theology. Well, what is dual covenant theology? Well, dual covenant theology holds that there are two covenants. There's one covenant between the Jews and there's one covenant for the Christians. And so basically, the Jews have their Messiah and the Christians have their Messiah as well. Now, this is not quite accurate because, according to St. Paul in the Bible, the new covenant has replaced the old covenant. The old covenant is a Jewish covenant, it's the Mosaic covenant, the Abrahamic covenant. The new covenant in Christianity is the covenant between Jesus Christ and humanity and the sacrifice on the cross. So, in our belief system, the new covenant has completely replaced the old covenant, and so we do not have to pay. I mean, for example, I think this is a good thing because when we look at the world today, and when we look at places like Israel, and we look at the problems that are occurring there, to some extent they're occurring because of dual covenant theology, in the way that the West is involving itself in a conflict over there. There is an underlying presumption that Christians are going in there to help their Jewish brothers from these heathen Muslim hordes that are hell bent on taking over their land. That's not quite the way we as Christians should present our case. We have as little in common with Jews as we do with Muslims. That's a fact. But dual covenant theology places Christians and Muslims Christians and Jews into the same box. In the same way that Afrocentrism places mixed race people and black people in the same box. Whereas there are some sustainable differences, similarities, but there are differences as well. In the same way, the similarities between Christianity and Judaism, there are significant differences as well, which have to be taken into consideration, especially in this day and age where we have these problems in places like the South Bank. Sorry, it's not the South Bank, the West Bank in Jerusalem. So we have these issues, and we do need to be able to make a differentiation between Christianity and Judaism in order to, because you see, the thing with the dual covenant theology is lends itself to the whole idea of Zionism, that, there is a Jewish homeland, and the Jews, the Jewish homeland would be rebuilt, and the Messiah will return, and a lot of Christians feed into that, which is patently untrue, because after Jesus died, it was just, the covenant is now between the body of Christ, which is the new church, and Jesus Christ himself. It's not between any other belief system. And, it's between the body of Christ, the Christian church, so to speak, and Christ. So that's the whole belief system in itself. And by adopting this belief system, we would hopefully be able to sever ties with the past with regard to the way that people have viewed the conflicts in the Middle East. I'm certainly one who believes that, yes, for sure, the Jews need their homeland. That's for sure. And I'm not a proponent of people who believe that they should give it up. I think it's just a ridiculous idea. But nevertheless, having said that, I still would say that a lot of people should still not conflate their religion with Judaism and see it as a reason to support the Jewish people, their quest for a homeland. I support the Jewish people simply because it's a principle that everyone should have a homeland. So, and it's not because I'm a Christian and I'm going to the defense of my Jewish brothers who are now, at the mercy of some Muslim hordes. I'm not. That's not my angle. So that's the part of the belief system. We have to separate politics from religion, and Christianity has to be presented as exactly as it is. Otherwise, we will continue to have these problems. And to a large extent, anti-Semitism throughout the ages has been a product of dual covenant theology. Whites have felt as though the Jews are sort of somehow artificially grafted onto them as a people. They've always resented this. You can feel it. It's a seething contempt and a seething hatred that derives from the fact that they feel as though, and it comes from Judeo-Christianity. That's where it comes from, Judeo-Christianity. Jews are, you could say, bonded to Christians through this thing, and not just the religion, but the peoples as well. And so this is, to a large extent, over the period of the ages, created a lot of resentment, and sometimes it's led to wholesale confusion.
When you're dealing with biracial people, how
Right.
do you incorporate that religion into it? I mean, you might have two different religions also combined in those two different races. How do you make that?
Well, one thing I have to point out, and I have to be very clear about this, is that it is a Christian organization. So all members would have to convert, if possible, to Christianity in order to join, because they'd have to subscribe to the moral aspects and the spiritual aspects of the beliefs of this particular belief system. I don't believe in, for myself, the concept of religious freedom. I believe that there should be one religious belief system per country. I believe that preponderance of religious freedom is where we are now with regards to the problems we have. And we have, obviously, Judaism is quite prolific in America, and this has created a backlash amongst Muslims who feels as though they're being unnecessarily sidelined by this, and it would create, to some degree, resentment as the Muslim population begins to increase in America. And we can see it with people like AN, what's her name? Omar, who's based somewhere in Minnesota, I believe. She believes that, she constantly makes statements, inflammatory statements about Jewish people, and I feel part of it is because there is some resentment. They feel as though the Jews have a bigger slice of the American dream than they do, and so they feel as though they must somehow, you know, take necessary measures to ensure that it's more of a level playing field. So,
So there was one other question that I know I keep throwing things at you here, but uh, biracial and people of color
right.
are these separate entities or are these inclusive?
Well, as I previously stated, when people talk about people of color, they're talking about ethnic minorities. And when you talk about ethnic minorities in places like America, you're talking about people like black people, Mexicans, Indians, Chinese, that sort of thing. Now, if you look at those people, they are what I'd call traditional races of people. You know, they have countries they are from, you know, that have been around for thousands of years, have their own civilizations. And as I've stated as well, they have their racial identities were having passed down to them from generation to generation by fathers, from fathers to sons, so on and so forth. Whereas with biracial people, it's not so much the case. You know, biracial people, for the most part, came about due to expansion of the West around the world, an expansion of Europe and colonialism, the age of exploration, that sort of thing. You know, when people started moving around the world and different races were brought into contact with one another, and this all occurred beginning somewhere around 600 years ago. Was when all this occurred. So if you could, it's easy. It's you could say that biracial are a younger race of people because, or a non-tribal race of people because there are no tribes of half black, half white people that go back to the times of bows and arrows and spears and that sort of thing. That if other people, like white people, they originally emerged from tribes. So did black people, so did Chinese people, so did Indian people. And it goes back thousands of years. They're established races, they're traditional races of people, whereas mixed race people are more recent race of people that came about, I'd say, only about 600 years ago because, like I said, they don't extend back to tribal times. You know, they're quite modern, and they're not the product of people like them who existed, you know, thousands of years ago. Like, for example, there wouldn't be, say, a product of half Chinese, half white people, or tribes of half Chinese, half white people that came about thousands of years ago because there's no such thing. But there
But
are mixed race people. True.
but I mean, in terms of war,
Right.
and you mentioned that you were a veteran. I don't know whether you were a combat veteran or not, but
Well, my
you,
father was. Father was.
but as they say, to the victor belong the spoils.
Right.
And back in the, I mean, there was Genghis Khan, and he conquered parts of Russia and
Right.
as far down as India,
Right.
and soldiers by hook or by crook. I mean, they have populated in other communities, whether they were considered slaves, concubines, or whatever.
Right.
So, I would tend to think that as a product of war. Now, I don't know whether that means that they were necessarily accepted into society, whether they were considered lower caste, but
Uh-huh.
I'm sure that there were some type of mixing of the tribes just
Right.
to just I mean hey, that's kind of how things happen. I mean,
Right.
now we hear pictures, even I mean, even in the modern days of war atrocities. So
Right.
so how do what about the biracial people that harbor those types of?
Okay, well, but that's not too long ago though.
Right,
That
right.
that time is
Yeah,
so
I understand what you're saying.
right,
As far as the length of time, it only
right,
might be a second. I understand that part,
right,
but I'm just saying. I mean, just like the Jews figured that they were entitled to this piece of land because
right,
of what was passed down through the Scripture. How
right.
do
That's right.
you? What about the people that feel that they have nowhere to call their own, and I'm talking about biracial people that perhaps weren't intended to be biracial, but they are in this group anyway, so
Yeah,
such as any other type of outcast would be. How do
right,
you how do you work past things like that? And I heard you talk about the spiritual concepts and
right,
and the different education within the
right,
community. Is that
right.
some of the things that you take that education falls under?
Yeah, yeah, it does. Yeah, because like I said, I mean, people may not belong to a particular group, and they might not have claim to full nationality within that group. That's a presumption. If you're not, I mean, for example, I mean, if say back in the days, if you're in totally completely European white, you're not considered a full-fledged citizen to some extent. However, I have said before that insofar as mixed race people were a product of colonialism, which is principally something practiced by the West, they do have some stake in the West, which they should claim. I believe that a lot of people would say, well, your black heritage is Africa, really. But, well, let's look at it very carefully. I mean, if I were to go to Africa right now and try to claim citizenship, it would be probably quite difficult for me. It's a fact. It's not easy to just go to somewhere and gain citizenship. I'd have to prove that I was born there. I had family that lived there. I have to prove that I'm pretty much a citizen of that country, at least through my family. So, and that would be the way to gain citizenship. So you find there are a lot more people who are citizens who are mixed race who are citizens of the West than there are people mixed race people who live in Africa. There's a preponderance of mixed race people living in the West, whereas there's not so much living in Africa and places like that. So, based upon that, I'd say that even though mixed race people may be marginalized, I mean, until recently, and to some extent, even till now, still it's incumbent upon them to see themselves as products of the West, because this is pretty much true. As I've said before, uh, obviously, when you look at America, the founders came from Europe and Africans came from Africa, whereas, biracials were a product of, this country, and the intermixing that occurred in America once, all these people had arrived. And later on as well, when other communities arrived in America, like, for example, the Chinese community, you know,
Um, one I saw your video on YouTube,
right, right,
and
gotcha, yeah,
and I did repost it for my audience and
right,
for
gotcha.
so could you kind of tell us where the state where you are now as far as
Right.
organization has the election of Biden has it given you more steam when you
Okay,
see some of the things the QAnon and things like that does that
right.
does that help you get your message across? In other words, where are you now in your stage of development?
Well, I mean, obviously, with the Biden election, it's a whole new ball game. I feel the Biden election is farcical because if they feel the American people or the media is informing the American people that they can't have someone like Donald Trump as president because he is to an extent seen as a strong white person, and a strong white person infers white supremacy. So they'd rather have a weak white person because he doesn't exude the somewhat menacing air of a white supremacist. So that's a very, very flawed reason for voting for someone or for proposing someone at such high office. You know, because people feel threatened by Donald Trump because he's a white supremacist, because he's a white person who's very, forthright, you know, whereas Joe Biden is an old codger who can hardly string a sentence together, but since he's not a threat, he does not imply white supremacy. And that's the whole raison d'etre.
So, do you
At
will
least,
you?
and I think it's so. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was asking you. Do you think that you'll have someone in place to at least make a run at 2024, or are you looking further
Well,
down the line?
a bit further down the line, for the Futurist Party. That's for the Futurist Party, not for the biracial nationalist movement. The Futurist Party is a political wing. So that would be probably further down the line after some grassroots organization reaching out to the Republicans, seeing how there is a talk of a third party, and they say it may be one called the Patriot Party. Again, I feel like that sort of party would be more synonymous with what's happening in the past, whereas we need to break new ground, I believe, especially and embrace the modern times we live in. Embrace the zeitgeist. We are now in various space exploration. We need a political organization that can recognize that, and to some extent make headway in that direction. Because we have a choice. We have a choice of going back, or we have a choice of going forward. I feel that we have, what we've been experiencing in society is the old wounds can heal. They can heal. But then someone can come along and scratch them, and they can start bleeding all over again. People say that they felt that there wasn't that much racial animosity until Barack Obama turned up, and then he sort of ramped it up somewhat with some of his rhetoric, And they feel that people like Sean King and Kaepernick are products of the Obama years, with the Obama administration. That particular type of mixed race person has come to prominence, someone who's very militant, very pro-black, something more reminiscent of the 60s and 70s than of 2020 or 2021. So that's pretty much, what the issue is right now. People feel as though, and that's why I feel it is important to form an organization that examines the type of rhetoric that's being put out there. Because it's very easy for someone to infiltrate a demographic, like a biracial demographic, and turn people on to being very militant by redefining their identity or taking them back to a period in time when that thing was pretty much the norm. Like I said, that whole Copernic thing is very much a 70s thing with a pro, and a militant type of approach. But unfortunately, that's a bit old school. That's kind of retro, We need some more modern type of representation. I know it looks very fashionable, but it belongs to another time period. So that's pretty much it in terms of. So in terms of Biden, where we are now with Biden, well, if the gains, and I believe it will gain some influence within the next, say, 6 months to a year from now, then we may be able to start pressuring some people within the political establishment, especially when it comes to representation. I mean, obviously, we know that the vice president is of mixed heritage. And we may start presenting some of our ideas to her to ensure that these ideas gain a wider audience. I mean, there is a lot of, there's been a lot of to-ing and fro-ing as to what her ethnicity really is. Should we call her mixed Indian, Jamaican? It's been that, or just African American. It's been that going on. And it didn't occur so much with Barack Obama. He was just accepted as a black man, and that was it. But with regard to Kamala, there is more of a debate going on. And this debate could prove to be fruitful when it comes to this type of belief system that I'm espousing. So we could perhaps at some point be able to approach her or someone like her, or put pressure on someone like her to start acknowledging this new group in society, because she'll talk all about black people and she'll talk all about Mexicans, but she was not once mentioned Native people, which is quite unusual considering the fact that she is one herself. And this is what we should start trying to make politicians aware of. They would have to speak specifically about their own group, because other than that, they're sort of shirking their responsibilities in some way, because they're not actually highlighting an up-and-coming demographic in society and how they could contribute in a beneficial way to society in the long run.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on the show. I'm sure a lot of people had never heard of the biracial national foundation.
National Communion. I have copies of the book as well. And
make sure give us a little plug there. Tell everybody where they can find the book. Do you have a picture? I mean, do you have one of them that they can see?
That's it. I got it around. I got the wrong way around. There we go. The camera's a little bit messed up there. I believe this is it.
Okay, the fifth race, biracial nationalism. Okay. And can we find it online? Is it at?
Yeah, it's available on a publisher called Liberty Hill. They have hard copy available on their website. It's also available at Barnes and Noble.
Okay.
And they have it as well. So look, here we go. That's it. That's a copy of it. And that's sorry, my camera's a little bit messed up, so it's not that great to see, but there we go.
Well, as I said, we put up a copy of it's included in your video. And
okay.
And I did put up a copy, so you can go to our website, follow the link to. It's called AN Imperfect UNION. We're also on the Chronicles of Whining Donald, from Vietnam to Pennsylvania Avenue, and you can catch us on our YouTube channel. So we would like to invite you back maybe after Biden's first 100 days and see if there's been any progress or what you think about his first 100 days in office and Kamala's performance. And it was great having you on the show. So why don't you give us your final thoughts and tell any social media you may have or anything like that.
Okay. Well, what's happening right now is that I am doing the podcast circuit. I have a number of shows I will be appearing on. And I've appeared quite recently on a show called 9 to 5 Hackers. That's based in Chicago. And I will be appearing on another show called Ex Nihilo or Ex Nihilo. I believe that's Latin for out of fashion. And it's another podcast I'll be appearing on. And I'll also be appearing on another podcast, I believe by, I'd have to, I'd have to send you this. It's, he's, well, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he does a lot of counseling, and he does, and he has a show that addresses modern topics. And I'd have to send you a link to his show. But just what I'm doing. Generally, I'm doing the podcast circuit. I'm not going through YouTube to publicize the movement because obviously with censorship and everything nowadays, it's a little bit harder to get these sort of messages out there, especially if you have anything that's the right wing in it. You're automatically going to be censored. So I'm getting into podcast circuit and I'm spreading the message via podcast. So that's that's the way that's where I'll be, and I believe that obviously, given the novelty of the idea, it's more chance of it spreading or more people hearing about it because obviously it's quite a new and different idea from everything else that's out there. So they say novelty trumps precedence. So whatever's new tends to have more of a ability to grab people's attention than things that have been around for a lot longer. So I will be on the podcast circuit, and obviously I've done a lot more by then in 100 days, and I'll be able to obviously give you the rundown on how things are progressing and how far we are getting with the organization. I'll also have to send you a link to my website because we're having it updated, so we're having some stuff done to it at the moment. So it's sort of under construction, and it should be done by the end of this week. So, and on the website, you can sign up to be a volunteer or form a chapter within your state. There's that option as well. So I'll be keeping you clued as to that particular.
All right, sir.
Okay, so thanks for having me as a guest again.
Oh, hey, it was. I learned a lot, and I look forward to talking with you again. We're both you're in LA, and I'm down here in San Diego, so there's a possibility that we can do this again sometime soon.
Sure. Okay, so thank you, and God bless. And I'll be around. If you need me back on your show, I will be. Just drop me a line, and I'll be around.
Yes, sir. You have a great night. Thank you so much.
God bless. Thank you very much.
That was Mr. Christopher Griffiths, the founder of the Biracial Foundation. And it was a very interesting conversation, something that I've just heard of. And it's very interesting how I think the most interesting thing to me was the fact that this was a right wing conservative group. But it is that time again. It is time for the San Diego Black Party, San Diego Black Panther Party. This is their time. I always allot it to them. And tonight we do have Brother Aaron on the show. Brother Aaron, how are you doing? I do see he's there. Do I have him on mute? No, I don't.
I'm good, brother. How you doing?
No, I'm doing fine. And I see Brother Williams is here also. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good, brother. All power to the people.
Yes, sir. I had something on a little different tonight. As I said, this was a gentleman who's the founder of. Yes, can you hear me?
He might have a lag.
Yeah, there might be a lag.
Can you hear me?
Not sure. Yes, sir. We can hear you. The gentleman I had on was part of the biracial nationalist movement,
Huh.
and this is actually a right.
I can hear you.
Uh,
Can you hear me?
uh, yes, sir. We can hear you. I'm going to turn it over to Brother Williams here in a moment. I was just giving him a little background on another separatist movement that seems to be afoot here. But, brother, I'm going to turn it over to you because there were some things that you and Brother Aaron had to talk about last week. That we seem to get
Yeah.
interrupted. So I'm going to turn the show over to the two of you.
All right. Hopefully, Brother Aaron's signal is good. Can you do you hear us, Aaron?
Let me see if
We don't hear you. I don't know if you're talking. I can see you, but don't hear you, and you got a lag. All right. So if his is going to lag, I just jump into some things.
I got you. I believe there is a some sort of 10 time lag.
It's
bring
only on your
From
side though.
your end.
Go ahead, Aaron, and just kind of introduce yourself and go into you founding the new Black Panther Party.
Yeah, there was a 5 or 10 second time lag, I believe, on your end. I'm not sure if you're gonna get this twice, but I do hear you. I do see you right now.
So, brother Aaron, did you hear what Brother Williams was asking to tell us a little bit about the founding of the new Black Panther Party? Let me see if I can. Let me see if I can put him back on. Maybe that
Okay.
is that any better, Brother Aaron?
Okay. Well, I'm just gonna go ahead and talk, and hopefully you guys will kind of let me know if you're getting this audio, because I can hear both of you guys very well. So I'm just gonna go ahead and talk for right now. The new Black Panther Party was basically founded in Dallas, Texas, 1911, by myself and mhm.
We heard you say
Yeah,
by
I'm actually
yourself.
talking. You guys aren't getting any of it, I don't guess.
No, we're getting some of it.
Not sure if you're getting any of the conversation.
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, we can hear you.
We can hear you. If you're looking at the screen, we can
Can
hear
you hear
you.
me now? Is that a
Yes.
better?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay,
If you're looking at the
I didn't.
screen, we can hear you.
It may even do better, Aaron, if you cut off your video, but just keep your audio on, and then the signal won't lag.
Oh, his audio is off now. He turned off his audio, not his video.
me see here.
Okay, can you hear us now, Mr.? Can you hear us now, Brother Michaels? Now it's my unmute.
There you
Okay,
go.
can you hear us now?
Yeah, his mic is on, but I don't hear nothing.
Yeah, Brother Michaels. I'm not sure because I can hear you very well.
Yeah.
But maybe you can fill in until he can come back, Brother Williams.
All right. So in regards to founding of the New Black Panther Party, I believe he founded it in like 1987 in Dallas, Texas. The organization itself started out because Aaron Michaels was a talk show producer for a radio program called Talkback, which basically dealt with different political issues in the community. And it was actually the main guest that was on the show was Dallas County Commissioner John Wiley Price, who was and continues to be very active in the Dallas community in terms of dealing with oppressive, issues that deal with oppression, political awareness, and addressing things in the Black community. Period. And Aaron Michaels basically was a producer of that of his talkback show. And from that, they would go out and engage in different type of protests within the community, and all this stuff is what predates leading up to the founding of the Black Panther Party in Dallas. And ultimately, they went from just being dressed out in all black on the protest line to finally deciding to establish themselves officially as an organization. And so with that, he chose to work as the Black Panther Party. And the difference between him establishing it as the Black Panther Party versus the New Black Panther Party had a lot to do with addressing the modern day conditions of our people. And so from that standpoint, recognizing what happened with COINTELPRO, the New Black Panther Party did not want to face a lot of the same levels of scrutiny and same pitfalls that took place with the Black Panther Party, as well as addressing it from the fact that we're dealing with a new generation. And that kind of to me, boils right back into what we're going to be dealing with now with upsurge of a lot of youth coming into the movement as well. And so I think it's important that people get the message and hear some of the things that we faced when the New Black Panther Party was first established back in the late 80s, early 90s, and got itself up and going. I don't know if Aaron can if you can hear us or not. No, it's looking like he's still frozen. Okay, so just from that standpoint, as he established the Black Panther Party, there were certain people that was real instrumental in getting him, assisting him as establishing. One of them was a Alderman Michael McGee in Milwaukee, who actually ran a branch of the Black Panther Party called the Black Panther Party Militia. So that version of the Panther Party, came along and was very strong in the mid '80s, and so Aaron Michaels worked with him and took a lot of notes and guidance from him as he established it. Another prominent figure that helped him out was Daruba Ben Wahad, who was with the Panther 21. And Daruba actually was a political prisoner that did 17, I believe 17, it was either 17 years or 19 years in prison. I can't recall right off which one, but he ultimately won his freedom and was able to sue the United States government for locking him up. And Daruba Ben Wahad actually also did a lot of political organizing as well as politics in Ghana. So he moved back and forth to Ghana, and also assisted Aaron Michaels in establishing the new Black Panther Party. So again, it was founded in Dallas, Texas, and ultimately the organization itself ended up growing across the United States as a result of a few major issues that took place to put it on the map. One being the Dallas Independent School District school board meetings, which ended up the Black Panther Party, new Black Panther Party, ended up taking the lead on a lot of the issues that was going on in the school district in regards to how they was addressing curriculum, how a lot of the black schools were being underfunded, as well as the way the programs was operating within the school district. And we actually had a situation where the in the Dallas Independent School District president, whose name was Bill Keever, was caught up doing a lot of fraudulent things, and we got him. We ended up protesting right along with the community and getting him removed. And then you ended up finding out there was issues that was taking place within the economics aspect of the way the school district was being ran, and so the school superintendent ended up getting removed from position. So as these things was happening in Dallas, they were making at the time they were making national headlines, and what also brought national headlines and attention to the situation was at one point we're doing the school board meetings, we actually talked about going armed to the school board meetings, and as a result of that, and this had to do with the fact that what happened was they ended up using the Dallas Independent School District, ended up using Dallas Police Department to try to intimidate and actually attend the board meetings. And they basically arrested certain members of the party, Aaron being one. It was Aaron Michaels, it was Keith Anderson, and Nathaniel Anderson, who were the three people that was arrested at the school board meeting. And it was basically we found out later through a trial going to court that it was basically we were set up, and figuring that out, that actually caused us again to get jumped into the limelight because of the whole fiasco that was going on with the school district, and just how they was basically trying to shut down the community from being involved in the school board after we was able to get two high position people removed from office within the school district. So it was a kind of a retaliation thing that was taking place. And then Aaron, I don't know if you can speak on this. I don't want to get ahead of whatever story you wanted to say. Can you hear us?
We can hear him breathing. I know he's there.
Yeah. I see your lips move, but I can't hear you.
um, I might.
Can you guys
There we go.
hear me?
Yes,
Now
we
we can.
can.
You can hear me breathing. Okay. All right.
So let me
Wow.
jump in. If you can
so,
jump
so,
in, and
so if you can just start
You can
kind
hear
of.
me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right. Well, as long as you guys can hear me, I'll keep talking, and then you guys just let me know where I'm filling in parts at.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Rob is actually brother Robert is actually right about everything leading up to this point. Um, as we began to go to the Dallas Independent School Board meetings that were going on, because we had a number of issues that were on the plate at that time. A number of issues that were concerned for African American parents, things of that nature, black people in general. There was a lot of racism going on within the school district. Now you got to remember that Dallas Independent School District had not come from under the federal guidelines of the federal judge overseeing the school district in terms of its race policy. They had been under that school ruling for about 30 years at that point in time. So racism within the Dallas Independent School District is still prevalent even in among the school board members and things of that nature. There were a number of things that were going on. Just kept the heat up under the fire against them. The night that we were arrested for the Dallas Independent School District's meeting, there had been a private meeting by the DISD School Board and the Dallas Police Department, and they had some new rules that they were going to implement that night. And implementing these new rules meant that nobody could be standing up in the school board meetings. And and the thing that was said was, if the Panthers are standing up in the school board meetings, they get arrested no matter what. So they arrested myself and Nathan Anderson and Keith Anderson. They broke Nathaniel Anderson's arm. So we spent a couple of hours in jail. We were bonded out. When we got out of jail the next day, this was headlines in the newspaper. But the problem with that is that the black school board members were never privy to any of the school board meetings with the Dallas Police Department. Dallas Independent School District only had school security. They had never even implemented a police presence with their police officers on the DISD school campuses. So what happened was a meeting was called between the black business community, the Dallas Independent School District uh, board, and the. And so what I told them was that there there are no more outs in this whole situation. You guys had private meetings to arrest us for no reason. You broke one of my people's arms, and at that point in the game, we had unwritten rules within the new Black Panther Party. We were not going to be attacked by anyone, and it meant we were not going to be attacked by the Dallas Police Department. We were not going to racist brutality and attack, things of that nature, and we definitely weren't going to let a school board attack us and get away with it. So our unwritten rules is, if you attack us, then we will defend ourselves. And that's any aspect of open racism or closed racism that we saw at that time. So we told them we're coming back to the school board meetings, which they were going to have the next night. So we want to come back to the school board meetings, and we were going to be armed at that next school board meeting. And being armed means that if any police officer, didn't matter if the police officer was black, white, brown, yellow, red. It didn't matter to us what color the police officer was. If they brought any police officers in there to arrest us again, we were going to defend ourselves. And so the interesting thing about that is, you know what you're saying, and I say, yeah, I know what we're saying. I'm saying that you coming to get us at the school board meeting, we're going to defend ourselves, which means that not only are some Panthers going to be dead in the meeting, it's going to be some dead police officers in the meeting. So, and I said, and whoever else puts their hands on us again, it's going to be some dead folks in the meeting. So Dallas Independent School District decided that they were going to cancel all of their school board meetings for the next couple of months. They were never going to have a school board meeting as long as they didn't have the cooperation of the new Black Panther Party. But the self-defense aspect of the organization at that moment was not just to take guff from racist brutality and attacks from whites, but we dealt with a number of issues in our community. We at that moment, we had probably been a few years out of dealing with drug dealers who were selling crack cocaine in the community. It's like I told them, it didn't matter where the oppressor was or what color the oppressor was. We were going to defend the community, defend ourselves to the hilt. And I think often black people think this is just about race, that we are defending ourselves against white people in general. And that's not true. We didn't care who the oppressor was. We didn't care if the oppressor was black. We didn't care if the oppressor was white. We didn't care if the oppressor was an American Indian. We didn't care if the oppressor was Asian or Iranian. It didn't matter where you were from or what color your skin was. If you were oppressing the black community, we were not going to let you get away with it. And if we had to use force to remove force to remove you, we were. And there were a number of businesses in the community at that time who were cooperating with drug dealers and allowing them to sell drugs in their stores and on the outside of their stores. And we weren't going to put up with that either. So we had to remove a number of elements from the black community at that time, including store owners and drug dealers at that time.
Now, I don't know whether you can hear me not, you or Brother Williams, but about the time that the jogger got uh, killed in Atlanta, we were in touch with the Huey P. Newton Gun Club out of Dallas. Is
Can
that
you
a
guys still
part
hear
of
me?
the? Yes. Is that a part of your organization?
The Huey P. Newton Gun Club is not a part of our organization, but
Can you guys hear me?
yeah, we can hear you. I guess you have a lag. I don't know if you hear us. The Huey P. Newton Gun Club is not a part of our organization, but the members of the Huey P. Newton Gun Club, the founding member, Babu Omawali, actually came out of the Dallas chapter of the New Black Panther Party back when I was actually the Dallas chairman and Aaron Michaels was our national minister of defense. So that's interesting
Can
from
you
that
guys still hear me?
standpoint.
Yes. Yes, we can still hear you.
You guys hear me?
Yes,
Yeah,
we can. Yes.
you must have a lag, Aaron. We hear you, but it's like you lagging. Okay, so like I was saying, yeah, the Huey P. Newton Gun Club was what the founding chapter and the founding of that organization came out of Dallas, Texas, and the person that founded it, Babu Amawali, actually came out of the Dallas chapter of the New Black Panther Party.
Now, they were taking part in policing the community, and as Brother Aaron mentioned, they also were talking about the drug dealers and some of the things that were happening in the community. So, how were you able to work together without being mutually surveyed or under the scrutiny of the Dallas law enforcement?
How do we deal with that? Repeat that last part. How do we deal with what?
How did you deal with that? I mean, I believe Texas is an open carry state, isn't it?
Right, it is.
But I mean, just like in the old days, armed black men within the community usually brings a certain amount of fear and intimidation from the establishment.
It does, but see, the thing about Texas, and to me, Texas has just always been its own different animal. When we dealt with armed protests in Texas, because people are more or less used to seeing guns out and about in Texas anyway, it was never really a big issue. I would say in terms of a major scare, so to speak, people a fear people had about seeing us with weapons out in Texas, especially in Dallas. Again, what Aaron didn't get a chance to go into it, but it was a time to where when we were dealing with the patrols in the black communities to address drug dealers, we would have our weapons with us when we go out and confront drug dealers, from doing crack cocaine in the neighborhood. So a lot of the things that had to do with us initially doing armed maneuvers. Now I'm talking about the early days of the New Black Panther Party. when we did armed maneuvers, obviously wouldn't make the news. They never had news cameras on us when we would go out in the community armed to address drug dealers. It only created that level of sensationalism when it would appear as though we're doing some
Mm-hmm.
type of
Mm-hmm.
armed protests. But those armed protests were developed out of the fact that we again would bear weapons to address issues in our community to where we felt our life might be in danger. So the whole protest thing, is making a statement, but initially the weapons had to do with us addressing issues in the community that deemed the world we wanted to make sure that we were protected against drug dealers, and we were protected against the negative elements in our community. And those things don't get it obviously didn't get the press that they deserve, because here we are in the community dealing with crack cocaine, and also dealing with police officers who, one funny case in point where we dealt with a police officer that was trying to get a known drug dealer to press charges against us, because we were standing in front of his house demanding that they stop selling crack cocaine. And so the police officer was trying to get him to press charges on us. That just tells you how bad off things were in certain aspects of the South Dallas community, to where you got a cop that is, instead of actually addressing the fact that here you go, a known crack dealer is in the community, he's trying to get them to come out against us. So, that's kind of the backdrop that we dealt with in terms of some of the blatant open racism that we had going on in Dallas. You had situations to where, for instance, I even myself, when I was younger, and this is actually during a time when I want to say maybe just a few years before I joined the party. But one of the instrumental things that made me join the party is I got pulled over by a police officer who referred to me as a nigga and told me that they don't want to see me in their neighborhood. And this was in the area called Box Springs, and which is like a suburb area in Dallas County, and it's just an area where you have known police presence that are members of the Klan. I even remember seeing a white militia that operated heavily in the area. So Dallas and Texas in general is just a totally different beast than what you find here on the West Coast. I mean, it was, in terms of segregation, especially when we would deal with the incident that took place in Jasper, Texas, where you had a brother named James Byrd Jr. who got
Yeah, yeah,
beheaded. We confronted multiple times to where we would have to deal face to face with Klan members or just neo Nazis and just blatant racism like that. I remember we did a protest in Paris, Texas, to where we had the Klan members that came out to call themselves counter protesting the fact that we're dealing with certain aspects of police brutality that was taking place. So here we are trying to address the police issues in terms of obvious racism and the way the law is being enforced, and they had Klan members come out in their defense in the law enforcement. So that, what does that tell you about a lot of the situation? So armed maneuver, as it comes to that, was just kind of like part of what we did when we went to Jasper, Texas. The whole reason we did an armed maneuver there is because, keep in mind, you had a police department that was straight up racist, which is why the FBI moved in and seized jurisdiction, as well as state troopers. And the Klan flat out was saying that they're going to have a rally in the Black community to basically just bolster by the fact that they have some people that beheaded James Byrd. So the Black community was literally scared when we received the call to come down there. It was to defend the Black community from the Klans coming marching through the Black community.
yeah.
So
I did. I definitely remember that. Brother Michaels, can you hear us? We can hear you. We can hear you every breath.
I can hear you guys. If
Uh,
you can hear
so,
me,
yeah,
I'm not even sure if you can still hear me.
yeah, we can hear you.
I know there seems to be about a 2 or 3 minute time lag here. Yeah, it seems to be a 2 or 3 minute time lag in between conversations, so I'm trying to keep up with what everyone is talking about. I well, I find it not ironic in the time that we live in now that white supremacy, police departments, the militarization of police departments around the United States, police officers who are part of the Oath Keepers, who did the riot on the state capitol in DC on January 6th, others white supremacy movements, all parcel of the same ideological value, which is strictly about white supremacy in America. And I find that not ironic. What I do find to be the most ironic thing about all these things that since January 6th, all of these things that are now coming out about white supremacy. And now the FBI in 2020, when you look at their the greatest threat to the internal security of the United States in 2020 and now delayed their findings of coming out in 2021. That document hasn't been released yet, probably possibly because of COVID. But there is a new in-depth detail about white supremacy in the military, about white supremacy in police departments around this country. When that deal is going to be released real soon, advise both of you guys to get that document. It'll be a downloadable PDF when that document comes out. But it goes so far as to say what we've been saying for decades is a problem of racism in America, when the very foundations of America are latent with white supremacy. That includes the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, police departments all over this country, and the United States military. We've been saying it for days that those institutions are the very reason white supremacy has existed as long as it has been until now. We've been saying that for all these decades. That's why white supremacy has lasted, because the Klan stopped wearing white uniforms and they started wearing police department uniforms. They started doing all the training in the United States military. So that's the reason that white supremacy has been allowed to flourish in America for about 100 or so years now. My contingency is that we need to get more wiser to what's going on and true institutions of self-defense, and not all this political posturing that I see a lot of organizations out there doing. You got this group out here calling themselves the the Not Fucking Around Coalition, the INFAC. They're supposed to be this armed black militia who look like the new Black Panther Party. They're not the new Black Panther Party because they don't have any ideological value to themselves. And I think we got to get away from talking shit about what we gonna do in the community. And I think we have to really start moving on truly creating an intelligence gathering apparatus within our Black liberation organizations. I was in the even doing those types of things within the new Black Panther Party. And one of the things that I tell people straight up, we got to get rid of all these damn egos that exist within Black organizations. We're not going to be able to get anywhere in this country as long as we got Black ego standing in the way of the liberation and freedom of Black people in general. White people and white supremacy is never standing in the ego wing for white supremacy. They work together. Neo-Nazis with the Klan working with Oath Keepers. I mean, all of these different different organizations are working with one another. We got to get rid of all this damn ego that exists within black organizations and truly start moving toward a covert counterintelligence operation and apparatus within the black community. And I think until we get there mentally, we're going to be forever fighting or trying to fight openly white supremacy when we start. And we do definitely need to be able to and get inside some of these other organizations, and same type of work that they've done with their counterintelligence programs on black people forever. I mean, you need only to look at the new movie that's come out called Judas and the Black Messiah to understand that on in the 60s that we needed to develop. We need to get to the point where we develop a military style covert counterintelligence apparatus that works within the African American community, the black community in general. And we just not there yet for whatever reason. Most of it's about damn ego, and we got to get away from that.
I think, Brother Robert, what Brother Michaels is saying is that we need drums back in the community.
Mhm. Yeah, so the it goes into the fact that, like I was telling you, when we used to carry carry weapons, it started out, and the primary reason was because we were addressing negative elements in the community, and they were they were not for posturing, and nor did we get permits to carry weapons. That's one of the things that the new Black Panther Party, even beyond Aaron Michaels' leadership, never did. Never once did the new Black Panther Party get a permit to protest. Because at that point, then it's basically just for show. Any time that the new Black Panther Party went out and dealt with anything as it applies to the weapons, it was, hey, we hitting the scene, and we doing our thing. Whereas other later organizations that come along dealing with that, it's just been a stage. And so, kind of like going back to what Avon was saying about the egos and the posturing, the deal is when you put yourself in that position, which is why we always have to be careful about the message that we're sending. And I'm talking about the modern day movements now. The message that you're sending when you're doing any armed, quote unquote, armed maneuver. If you're doing, you're carrying weapons to send a message, what is that clear message? Because it's real easy for that to get misconstrued and come across as if basically you're threatening some particular fraction of either the government or whatever, or a city, state, whatever, that if something don't happen, then we're going to take it to this level. And we know dang well, as community activists, going back to what Aaron was talking about with COINTELPRO, that we can't get away with those type of activities unless somebody else is involved. That kind of goes back to what we're talking about with the intelligence community, because they come down on us real fast if we are throwing out threats in terms of this is why we're carrying our weapons and this is what we're gonna do next. And it doesn't even actually make sense, because there's no way we could win a tit for tat standoff, nor should we even be trying to promote that would be the message that we're pulling off. So again, when we would, back in the day when we would go out and carry weapons, it had to do with us protecting ourselves as we conducting whatever business we're conducting in the community. When you're dealing with knuckleheads and you're dealing with people, the negative elements of the community that don't have your best interests. And from that standpoint, we're talking about, especially when it went to dealing with addressing crack dealers in the community. These cats will have street sweepers and all kinds of crazy weapon artillery, and have been known to fire upon people. So we went out to protect ourselves from that stance. So our show of force is always geared around the fact that we're here to address the real issues in the community, and we're here to defend ourselves if necessary, not just a posture.
Brother Michaels, if you can hear us, can we get a few final thoughts from you?
We can't hear you. We see your lips moving.
Brother Michaels, can you hear us?
Well, um, I would tell people this. Um, the same thing that they said in the 60s and 70s as part of the ideological values of the Black Panther Party is I believe there's like a 3 minute drag on the conversation. At least that's what I'm able to assume right now, that there is a three minute there's a 3 minute drag. You'll probably see my head move a couple of minutes, so it's
Yeah,
about a three
yeah.
minute drag lag time on
Mhm.
this conversation. But I'm going to answer your question um, and tell you what I think about this whole thing. The There's a statement that brothers and sisters in the struggle used to say back in the day: dare to struggle, dare to win. But if you never dare to struggle, you don't deserve to win. And so that is an invitation for members of the Black community to dare to struggle. And I think we have to move towards that. We can't get to the land, bread, housing, education, clothing, justice, and peace until we dare to struggle in the society they live in today. It's so much crazy going on out here right now that the whole Republican Party has now become the party of Trump. And that means to the American people as a whole is that racism is open for business right now. And so we have got to move on that ideology and move people away from that whole piece now. We've got to truly move in a covert and overt way. We got to get people in these meetings, these city plan commissions, these city meetings, these school district meetings. We've got to get our people in the meetings so that when decisions are being made financially, economically, judicially, politically about the Black community as a whole, that we're in the room. We should up one morning and genuinely going on if we're paying attention and we're in those meetings. We have a voice in those meetings. We shouldn't just be going along as we always have, but at least for the last 60 years, and allowing people to get away with stuff like they used to. We should be stronger than that now. We do need to develop a covert apparatus within the Black community. Uh, Whites have done it for the last 80 or 90 years. I think we have to use all of our I am for young Black men joining the United States military to get training. Um, they've been doing it for forever and a day. And I'm not saying that Black men need to come back to the community and do, you know, be or try to be prejudiced or biased in this country. And then remember, as I just said, prejudiced and biased. Black people in America, people can only be prejudiced or biased. But I don't even want them to use their prejudices and biases against anyone, not even other people of other color. I think we have to move beyond even that as it pertains to the freedom of Black people, not only in America, but in respect of the diaspora all over the world. And so but that does mean that we have to be able to see the big elephant walking down the street, as well as know that the big elephant is still in the room with us as we are having our meetings with the military, our meetings with the police departments, as we are having our meetings with the school boards around this country, and having our meetings with the bank. That the big elephant is still in the room called racism, and until we are willing to stand up and call it what it is, the reason America is still having all these problems is because America does not want to address the issue of racism. It's as plain as the noses on their faces. Let's deal with racism openly and honestly. Deal with the issue of race in America. And until we do that, we're gonna be forever putting out these little wildfires of racism within police departments where you got white police officers murdering black people. You got white police officers murdering white police officers doing this and white police officers. We're gonna be forever putting out wildfires and brush fire until we force the issue of police review boards all country police review boards with subpoena and investigative power. Until we get to that point, that's the only thing that's going to stop racism within police departments around this country. Now, damn it, I know that the police unions are against it, but my thing is tell them to kiss our ass because we going to do it anyway. And I think until we have a national collective movement moving towards police review boards with subpoena and investigative power, we're gonna be forever putting out brush fires within police departments. We're gonna march. White people gonna kill some more black folks. We're gonna march. We got to get to the point where we tired of that shit and start moving forward with a national agenda to deal with police officers in this country. And we got a lot of black police officers who are with us on making this happen. Those are my last statements.
Well, thank you, Brother Michaels, and we're going to have to get that problem solved. I'm going to see if there's something I can do on my end. Uh, Brother Williams, you want to give us your final thoughts for the evening?
Well, I just would kind of just bag up some of the things he said, some of the things Aaron said, because it goes back to, like I said in the past, in regards to making sure we know how to identify the difference between issues and problems. Because oftentimes when people go out and community organize and claim that they're looking to solve problems, they're actually more or less addressing issues. And Aaron referred to those issues as being grass fires. And that's absolutely right. Whereas it does seem to be small victories and does seem to be creating justice for individuals, is not doing anything to address the overall problems that are happening. So that basically means that it's going to continue to happen again and again and again and again. And it's kind of like addressing that from the standpoint of insanity, because we keep doing the same exact thing, expecting a different result. So the methodology in terms of how we're addressing our problems is that we continue to address them by addressing issues, and we have to step up our game. We have to do a lot better job in terms of what it is that we want to see change, and go at that change with specific maneuvers, specific plans of actions, and like Aaron said, address this more or less with a unified front as Panthers and as organizers and as members of collective organizations across the United States. So, you know, in ending that, it goes back to what he said about egos. We have to be able to discern against the people that are actually out here for the sake of creating messiahships, you know, which is one of the things that the new Black Panther Party originally set out against. And that's just propping up individuals, because we believe that we should raise up leaders within the community. And from that standpoint, that helps to deter situations where you have individuals that want to prop themselves up, so that we can get down to the real business of building solutions and building bridges to create avenues for development and growth that can outpace the pace of oppression. And so that would be my closing remarks on that.
Well, once again, I'd like to thank you and thank Brother Michaels. And I look forward to talking to you again next week. And for our audience, sorry about the delays, but I'm sure we got some very useful information. And Brother Williams, do you want to tell them, is there any way that people that might be interested can get in touch with the party, or maybe find some literature? I saw you had an event this weekend.
Correct. We was at the Soul Swap meeting. We're at the Soul Swap meet every month. So you can always reach the San Diego Black Panther Party through our Facebook page, which is Black Panther Party San Diego chapter. and just leave a message on that, and then we will respond and get back in touch with you that way.
All right, Brother Williams and Brother Michaels, look forward to talking to you again next week, or at least in the very near future. And everyone have a good night, a good weekend, and all power to the people.
All power to the people.